Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crime Family. This week, we'll be talking about the horrific and incredibly sad case of the 2009 Taconic Parkway car accident. It's quite unique because it's not your typical true crime case, but it's the story of how, on a sunny afternoon in July 2009, a car drove the wrong way for nearly 2 miles on a crowded New York highway, resulting in a fatal head-on collision that took the lives of 8 people, including 4 children. The events of the hours leading up to the deadly crash and the autopsy reports that came out after the fact revealed a devastating truth. So with all that being said, let's get started.
So, hey everyone, before we get into the case, I just want to talk about a new up and coming podcast. We like to support new up and comers like ourselves. We just want to let you know about a new podcast called Theory One, hosted by Cassidy Brown. She talks about true crime, conspiracy theories, and urban legends. Who doesn't love a fresh perspective on a good conspiracy theory? If you're interested in hearing about her perspective on some well-known cases like Jeffrey Epstein and Area 51, go check her out at Theory One.
Hello, friends, family, and enemies. I'm Cassidy, the host of Theory One, and Theory One is a podcast that talks about true crime, the paranormal, and conspiracy theories. From the JFK assassination to Area 51, topics vary, but each as creepy and fun as the next. If you're a fan of one or all of the above, be sure to check out Theory One on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And remember, stay safe and stay weird.
So, like I said, this is the Taconic Parkway car accident case. Do either of you know anything about this case at all?
No, I've never heard of it. I have no idea what it's about.
No, I've actually never heard about it either.
Perfect. That's what I like. So I actually became familiar with this case a couple of years ago. There was an HBO documentary that came out in 2011. It's called There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. And I knew nothing about the case before I watched the documentary, but when I watched it, then I kind of, went down the rabbit hole, like the Reddit forums and all the different theories and stuff about the case. So it is very interesting. So like I said in the intro, it revolves around the events of July 26th, 2009. Around 1:30 p.m. on the Taconic Parkway, which is just a section of the highway in upstate New York, several 911 calls came in from concerned motorists who reported a car driving the wrong way, going southbound in the northbound lane. There were many eyewitnesses and callers that claimed that the driver didn't seem to be swerving to avoid oncoming traffic, but was driving extremely fast and in a very straight line, seemed to have, be on a mission of sorts. It was actually the other cars that were on the road that had to swerve to avoid the vehicle. After driving nearly 2 miles in the wrong direction, the SUV hits an oncoming vehicle head-on, leading to a fiery crash on the highway. And the car that the SUV hit actually went on to hit a third car as well. So it was a 3-car collision in the end. Once emergency personnel arrived on the site, it became clear the gravity of the situation as there were multiple casualties. As it turns out, there were a total of 9 people inside the 2 main vehicles that were involved in the crash. 5 of these 9 people were children. And tragically, 7 were pronounced dead at the scene, and 2 were taken to local hospitals, and only 1 person survived the ordeal, and this was 5-year-old Brian, who was the son of the SUV driver, Diane Schuler. So that was the immediate scene of this case and kind of what started everything. But I'm going to go back just a few hours and talk about the morning leading up to the crash, and this relatively normal morning at first has become the main focus of the case and where much of the controversy and speculation surrounding the case comes from. So On the morning of July 26, 2009, Diane Schuler and her family were packing up their campsite at Hunter Lake Campground in Parksville, New York. The family had spent the weekend swimming, canoeing, having bonfires, and just generally enjoying time together as a family. Little did they know that this would tragically be the last weekend that they would ever spend together. Like I said, the case was covered in the 2011 HBO documentary, There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. And in this documentary, Diane's husband, Daniel, describes the events of the morning as very normal. He woke up early that morning, and around 7 a.m., he and Diane woke up the children and began packing up the campsite. And he said that they wanted to head out a little bit early so that they could avoid heavy traffic. After packing up, he said he and Diane sat down, had a few cups of coffee, and then left in separate vehicles. He left in his pickup truck with the family dog, and then Diane left in the SUV that she was driving, which was actually her brother's SUV. And in the car with her was her 2 children, 5-year-old Brian, 2-year-old daughter Erin, and her brother's 3 kids, Emma, aged 8, Allison, aged 7, and Katie, aged 5. So after leaving the campground, Diane's first stop was at a local McDonald's to get some breakfast. And now, according to the documentary, there's some surveillance videos of the McDonald's, and everything seems normal. Diane ordered the food, the kids played in the playground at the McDonald's, and when the authorities spoke to the McDonald's employee shortly after the incident, when they were doing an investigation about the case, said that nothing seemed strange or amiss about Diane's behavior. She seemed pretty normal from like the brief interaction that he had with her. So everything seemed normal. And even on the tapes, when they viewed the security footage, again, everything seemed normal as well. The next stop on their journey home on that morning was at a Sunoco gas station around 10:45 a.m. Now, there's also some surveillance video from the gas station, and this surveillance video shows Diane's SUV pulling up to the gas pump and Diane walking into the store. And footage from inside the store shows Diane speaking to the clerk very briefly and then walking out. When authorities spoke with this clerk during the investigation, he says that Diane was asking for some over-the-counter pain medication, specifically Tylenol, but the gas station did not sell any. So after he told her that they didn't have any, she left. And so the surveillance video shows her walking out of the gas station and into her car and then driving away. So there's a YouTube video by Dr. Todd Grande, and in his YouTube channel, he talks a lot about different cases, and he talks about like diagnoses or medical conditions that people might have, or like psychological things. He takes like that sort of angle on the case. But when he's talking about this case, mentioned that the gas station witness of the clerk that was inside the gas station, they say that it's not the most credible source, because he says that everything seemed fine, nothing seemed to be everything seemed to be normal, and there was no visible signs that Diane was in distress or that she was under the influence of anything at all. But again, it was a very brief interaction. If you look at the tape, it's maybe 15-20 seconds. And he also found it's also very odd that the gas station would not sell Tylenol or anything. Like, I feel like that's something that always is at a gas station. I mean, I could be wrong, but like, I feel like that's something that they sell for sure. If not Tylenol, then some sort of over-the-counter pain medication. So who knows if that's really what she asked for. I don't really have any reason why the gas station clerk would like lie about this, but maybe he's misremembering or something like that. And, I don't know how important it is to the case overall, but just an interesting tidbit. So after the surveillance video from the gas station after she drives away, that's like the last video footage there is of Diane, of the vehicle, or anything like that. But just after 11 a.m., the family drives along Route 17, Interstate 86, and they get to the New York Thruway. They go across the Tappan Zee Bridge, and according to reports, there were several witnesses who reported seeing this red minivan driving aggressively at this time. She was tailgating aggressively, she was flashing her headlights, honking the horn, and moving in and out of traffic. She was, swerving in and out of cars and into different lanes of traffic. And in the documentary, they actually interview the motorists of one car that said that she was tailgating them and they were bracing themselves for impact because they were sure that she was going to hit them. And then he also says that at one point she tried to pass him on the shoulder of the road, but then when she wasn't able to, she just got right back in behind him. So just an aggressive driver. But also in that video by Dr. Todd Grande, he also mentions that New York drivers are kind of like notorious for their aggressive driving, so no one actually ended up calling the police or 911 or anything about this aggressive driver because they just thought it was, some person who was just a terrible driver, who was like a risk taker. He just talks about how like in different cities or different states, they have different tolerances. Like, and New York wasn't necessarily a state where they would be super alarmed at somebody driving super erratically because it was kind of a common occurrence. So there was no police that were alerted or anything of her driving at this time. And then the case kind of takes a turn when at 11:37 a.m., Warren Hance, now this was Diane's brother, and he's actually the father of 3 of the little girls that were in the car, receives a phone call from Diane. And she claims that they were delayed in traffic and they'll just be a little bit late coming home because it wasn't supposed to be a long drive from the campground to the home. So she just called to say that the traffic was keeping them. And it's around 9:30 a.m. they left the campground. So at this point, it's almost 2 hours after they left. But, he has no reason at this time to think that anything is amiss. And then 8 minutes after this phone call, witnesses allegedly see Diane on the side of the road with her hands on her knees, and she's kind of bent over as if she was vomiting, getting sick. And again, she was in the same position a little while later at another rest stop that was nearby. And now there's some motorists that they interview in the documentary, the same ones that say that she was tailgating them and stuff, that say that they kind of pulled into a rest stop, and she also pulled into the same rest stop, and they saw her as soon as the car parked run out of the car and like holding her stomach as if she was going to be sick or something. So they noticed that she like that, but again, no one's really putting the pieces together of what could possibly be happening. All they know is that this woman seemed to be, not driving in the safest manner. And then when we look at the phone records of her cell phone as well, 12:55 p.m., there was a wrong number that was dialed from her phone. And then at around 1 p.m., Warren Hance, again Diane's brother, received another phone call, but this time it wasn't Diane on the other line. It was from his daughter, who claimed that Aunt Diane couldn't see properly and she couldn't speak clearly. She was worried about her behavior and something was going on. And this is when she says, "There's something wrong with Aunt Diane," which is the title of that documentary. That's why it's called that. But that's like one of the main things that she says in this phone call. So Warren did briefly speak to Diane herself, who also said that she couldn't see or speak clearly, and she claimed to be disoriented. They do mention that she sounds disheveled and disoriented. The call ends abruptly after 2.5 minutes. They do try to call back, and when they do get in touch with her again, like, she's just acting odd. Like, she calls him Danny, which is her husband's name, so she's like confusing his name. They don't know what's going on, but he's concerned enough, obviously. At this time, Warren tells the family to stay there, tells them to pull off to the side of the road, stay there, and he'll come and meet them to drive them the rest of the way home. But for some reason, Diane does not listen to him. She continues to drive yet again, leaving her cell phone on the side of the road. It's actually found by another motorist by the toll booths. So whether this was a mistake, she just forgot her cell phone at the side of the road, or she intentionally left it behind, we don't really know. And then around 1:10 p.m., there's 3 wrong numbers that are dialed from Diane's phone again. And then at 1:15, Warren tries calling Diane. Goes right to voicemail, which would be, it's on the side of the road. That's why no one's answering it. According to the documentary, so the car's movements directly after this are not precisely known, but like they don't know how she got to the eventual place, like the Taconic Parkway where the accident happened. But the next known location is on the Taconic Parkway, just after 1:30 p.m. Estimates suggest that she was traveling up to 85 miles per hour, or 137 kilometers. And was driving in a straight line, and reports, eyewitnesses say that she was gripping the wheel tightly. She was looking straight ahead, almost like she was in some sort of trance, but it wasn't like she was like dazed or confused. It looked like it was someone who was on a mission, knew exactly what she was doing. So they thought that was a little bit weird, but obviously all the other cars are beeping their horns. They're like waving at her, trying to notify her that like she's going the wrong way and gonna, very, very dangerous driving. And at around 1:35 p.m., after driving for nearly 2 miles in the wrong direction, this is when the minivan collides head-on with another vehicle, and this causes the other vehicle to then hit another car, like I said. So the 3-vehicle collision was a horrific scene, and by the end of the day, only 1 person out of the 9 involved would survive. That was Diane's 5-year-old son, Brian. There was 3 people in the other car that were hit: Michael Bastardi, Guy Bastardi, and Daniel Longo. And all 3 of them were killed at the scene. The only survivor, Brian, as a result of the crash, he suffered multiple broken bones and severe head injuries. obviously after the chaos of the scene and everything, I'm also going to play some 911 tapes of right after the accident happened, and there's some frantic, eyewitnesses who are there at the scene calling 911 to alert the authorities that the crash has happened. So I'll play that for you.
City Hall Police, 911 emergency.
Bad accident. Route 117. Route 117. What is this? Pleasantville Road?
Up to 9. Ma'am?
They died. Wait a second. I'm the phone. I'm not
Route
gonna help
117
you.
at Taconic? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there any injuries?
I really don't know. Hold on. Let me check it out. Hold on. Hold on. Thank you. Honestly, hold on. I really don't know. Yeah, there are. There's like little kids. The kids not moving. There's a whole bunch of kids. Honestly, the car smashed.
Okay, I'll call.
After the chaos of that day, the investigation that follows into like what exactly happened, this is kind of what brought the case into national attention. So they did a toxicology report of Diane, and the toxicology reports came back and concluded that at the time of the crash, Diane had both alcohol and THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, in her system. Her blood alcohol level was reportedly 0.19%, which is 2.5 times the legal limit, or almost 2.5 times the legal limit, which was 0.08. The medical examiner also concluded that it would have been the equivalent of approximately 10 drinks for someone of Diane's height and weight. So a significant amount of alcohol. So suddenly the case turned from an incident of an innocent accident to a story of where an intoxicated mother recklessly killed 8 people, including herself. However, the family, like her husband and her sister-in-law, who are heavily featured in the documentary, they're adamant that the toxicology reports could not be accurate. He claims that she barely ever drank and was in no way an alcoholic. He says that it would have been impossible for her to have been intoxicated to that extent because it had not aligned with the person that he had known for years. They were together for about 13 years. In fact, the family had even went so far as to hire a lawyer and a private investigator with a goal to contest the toxicology reports. They wanted to do further testing and to see what could have possibly happened because they did not believe that this could have been the case. Do you guys have any initial thoughts right out of the gate?
I was just gonna say you can't really fake a toxicology exam. If it's in your system, it's gonna be in your system. So this whole situation seems really odd. First, how did she even get to go the wrong way on such a big highway? Because she said she went through toll booths, right? So
at one point on her journey, it wasn't right before that, but it was
okay, but still
at some point. That was where her phone was left at the side of the road.
To get on the highway, to go the opposite directions, would be really hard to do, especially in New York, so it's a big highway. It just seems really impossible to do that, but I guess obviously not, and just sad how I just find this whole thing really weird to me. Not weird, but shocking in a way, that much alcohol was in her system, and the way she was acting, and that the guy at the gas station didn't really notice anything wrong with her. If she was that intoxicated, you would have noticed that.
Yeah, the McDonald's employees say that she didn't seem to be intoxicated at all. Everything seemed normal. Same with the gas station attendant. And even if you look at the surveillance video of the gas station, she's not stumbling or anything like that. There's no audio in the video. It's just image.
Weird.
So you don't know what she's sounding like, but none of them said anything of oh, this woman is severely intoxicated or anything. They just said she seemed very normal.
Because anybody who had 10 drinks in them, you'd think they would be some type of I don't know, stumbling of walking, and obviously the stumbling of language and stuff like that. Just seems weird that nobody really recognized that, or maybe she was just good at her composure. Who knows? And
the autopsy report also, it said that some of the alcohol hadn't metabolized, so it had been drank shortly before the accident itself. So it wasn't she had heavily drank all of it at right before she left that morning. Some of it had to have been consumed during the journey home at some point.
So do they know it was actually alcohol? I remember looking up these other weird cases where people become drunk without actually drinking anything. It's they have this weird, I don't think it's disease, but it's some sort of weird condition where their body produces ethanol when they're digesting their food, and it makes them drunk when they actually didn't drink alcohol. So I'm wondering if it's something like that. It's super rare.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that because throughout the documentary, the family is adamant. They say it has to be a medical condition, has to be something medical. They don't believe the toxicology reports. If someone's at the point where they're like drinking that heavily while all those kids are in the car with her, like the fact, because then it was like the talk that she had been like an alcoholic, she had been struggling with addiction, and this was just what it had resulted in. But they said there's no way that she could have like gone that long without anyone knowing at all if she was drinking to that heavily of an extent. And they also interviewed the campground owner, so they say like she was speaking to Diane before they left. She was totally fine, didn't seem drunk at all in any way, and like every person's interaction with her from that morning say that she was acting normal, except for like her brother when he's on the phone with her saying she's disoriented. So that's why the family is convinced that like the toxicology report is wrong, something medical. They talk a lot about how she had like a severe like abscessed tooth, and they think that like it could have caused her to like have a stroke, which could have caused something. I don't know, like I'm not a medical professional. I don't know like if a stroke can like create toxicology results that would reflect that, but they're convinced that like something medical. And they even interviewed people in the documentary. They say like in the weeks leading up to the incident, like they would notice like she's holding her jaw a lot, she'd be like clenching her jaw, like she was kind of in pain from like a severe toothache. They say that could have been why she went into the gas station to ask for the Tylenol if she was in severe pain, or why she might have taken a drink thinking it could have like as pain relief or something. The THC, that her family members do say that like she would occasionally smoke pot, like usually to right before bed, so that she could have a better night's sleep and stuff. So she was known to smoke a little bit, but nothing like obviously that would have like nothing was alarming. And even in like I think after something like this happens, if you're thinking in retrospect, then you start thinking of like, oh, this is a red flag, this was a red flag. But nothing, like nobody says anything about an incident where she got too drunk at any thing, like where she even would consume a drink. Like people said she barely ever drank. So the medical theory, like Katie, you were thinking like could be something that was legitimate. However, at the scene of the crash, inside the car, they did find a broken bottle of vodka. It's a 1.7 liter bottle of vodka. So that leads everyone to think like obviously she had the alcohol in the car with her. She was drinking in like the months and like the year after the incident when like this case was all over the news and stuff. So her husband Daniel did go on a lot of talk shows with his lawyer. He went on Oprah. He also went on Larry King talking about it. And they're questioning him like, how do you explain the vodka bottle in the car? How do you explain the toxicology reports? And then he had a story saying that they had one bottle of alcohol between the two that they would transport from their camper to home for like the whole summer, because neither of them were big drinkers. So like they would have one bottle of vodka that would last like the whole summer. They would have like a drink maybe on occasion. So he said that like they would transfer that one bottle back and forth in the car. So he was saying that it could have possibly been from that. Now obviously the bottle was shattered in that on impact of the car, so we have no idea like how much was in the bottle at the time of the crash, but her blood alcohol was 0.19, which was 2.5 times the legal limit. So I mean obviously like Steph said, you can't really fake stuff, like you can't fake a toxicology report like that unless it was something medical like Katie had said. But in the documentary, the family of the 3 older men that were in the other car that were struck by Diane's vehicle, they say they're very angry at Diane's husband and the family for going on like national TV and saying that like she wasn't drinking, that they basically say that they're in denial and that it's like causing like this pain to be drawn out for them because they're bringing it all up and they're trying to like be in denial about the fact of what was really going on versus just like admitting to the fact that she made a mistake and she was driving under the influence. In the documentary, they speak to Diane's sister-in-law, Jay, and she says that because Brian was the one survivor of the accident and he had to have like a lot of physiotherapy and therapy over the years after the crash, but he said that his one story has always been consistent since like the day of the crash and after, said that mommy's head hurt, she couldn't see. That's what he would keep repeating. Mommy's head hurt, she couldn't see. So he knew that something was happening with her head. Obviously she was disoriented when they spoke with her on the phone, saying that she was calling her brother by the wrong name and all that stuff. And in one of the phone calls, you can hear the kids crying in the back seat. The documentary also says that none of them were in their car seats. So one of them was only 2 years old. None of them were in a car seat or anything like that. I just find it, I don't know, like, it's such a weird thing to think that, like, it's like a huge, horrible accident, but it's just something about this case that's not just your typical crash, because there's kind of theories that ended up going around. Like, one theory was that it was something medical. Another theory was that it was just an accident. Like, she overestimated how much she could drink. She like mismeasured and ended up drinking way too much, and like that mixed with the marijuana, like had a concoction that just intoxicated her heavily more than she planned for. And then the third theory was that it was actually a planned and deliberate thing, and she just drank the alcohol so that she could get the courage to go through with it. It was something that she wanted to do, and she just knew that, like, if she had the alcohol and she lost her inhibitions, that she would be able to go through with it without backing out. But it seems like a very, very extreme thing to do. Like, if she did have suicidal thoughts and she wanted to do this, I feel like there was a way to do that without killing 5 kids that were in the car with her and then 3 people in the other oncoming vehicle. So the family does do the investigation. They do more toxicology reports. They also go through a lot of legal stuff with their lawyer. Like, they pay all this money to their lawyer up front, who then kind of, or not the lawyer, the private investigator, who then like kind of disappears, doesn't return their phone calls, all that stuff like that. And he claims that they did do tests. They interviewed like family friends and family history, and all of the money that they paid went towards that. Even though they were hoping that the money would go towards like paying for new toxicology reports or new tests. So they do new tests, and the new tests confirm the same thing as the original ones. That the blood alcohol level was the same, the THC levels were the same, and everything.
I find it weird that one of the theories is like, oh, maybe she just like drank a little bit too much. But like, if your blood alcohol level's that high and that's like 10 drinks, like any reasonable person would be like, yeah, that's a bit too much for me to drive. Like, did she maybe have like a history of alcoholism? Because maybe she was an alcoholic in the past, and maybe her family like just didn't know about it. Like her husband, and then, you know, just maybe something just tipped her over the edge, and she just wasn't able to stop drinking that day. I don't know. That's like one theory, but I feel like drinking that much by accident is just not a thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you look into the family history, or when they spoke with family friends or husband, they say it was a rare occasion to ever see her drunk, ever. Like, she wasn't really a drinker. She had no history of alcoholism or anything like that, or at least that they knew of. And that's why Daniel was so adamant that it couldn't have been, like, the toxicology reports couldn't have been true, because he's like, there's no way if I'm living with somebody that closely for 13 years that I wouldn't have noticed something. And, you know, like, sometimes people who are having alcohol addiction, like, they will hide like liquor bottles in the house, and they will like, but nothing ever was found.
Yeah, like some people are functional alcoholics, right, where they can like almost live a completely normal life, go to work, but they're actually, you know, like a closeted alcoholic, but that's how they function. They can drive to work, drink at work, nobody notices because that's just who they know them as. And then I'm thinking, like, did they ever do like an autopsy on like her organs, and like did they see that maybe her liver was really deteriorated from years of drinking that she was hiding from everybody? That's, I think, a good step.
Yes, so I was actually going to get into that. You asked the question at the perfect time, because it's like right segue into it. But yes,
I just have a question before you get into that. Like, or not question, just like a wonder. Like, I'm wondering, like, because before you said like about the children not being in their car seats, I was thinking like, oh, maybe it was an accident. Maybe like she had a stroke or something happened and she actually did not mean to do that. But then when you said those children weren't in like a booster seat or like a car seat, then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe like obviously she had something planned, because they would be in their car seat before they left the trailer park.
Yeah, it was like something was happening before they even really started the car, right? Because she didn't strap them in. So something was going on before she got in that car and started driving.
That's what I'm thinking. Because if they would have been strapped in their car seats, if nothing was gonna be planned or nothing was gonna happen, like, they would have been strapped in the car seat. And if they were strapped in the car seat, they might have been alive. That might have been saved their lives, but maybe she didn't want them to live. I don't know. I'm not saying, that's just what I'm saying.
Also, maybe though, like while they were, like said, the kids, like you'd hear kids crying in the background of the phone calls. Like maybe the kids were kind of panicking and like getting out of their seatbelts and getting the other kids out of their seats so they could like try and escape or something. Like maybe they did that while she was driving. That's another option too.
Yeah, and one of them was obviously concerned enough. She was the one who called her dad and said there's something wrong with Aunt Diane. Like, she can't see, she can't think clearly, like something's going on. She's slurring her speech, which is why the family thought, oh, maybe it was a stroke. Like, she's disoriented, she doesn't know what's happening. And at the time when the calls were coming in, that's what the family thought. Like, oh, she must be having some medical emergency, because that's all they knew at the time. But going back to your question about the autopsy of like the organs and stuff, so there was no cirrhosis of the liver at all, which would be typical for somebody who's a heavy drinker. And in the documentary, they do mention that, and he also says she was only 36 at the time of the crash, so she was quite young. So he says it is possible that she could have been a heavy drinker, but like she hadn't been drinking for that long enough for the cirrhosis to have occurred. So she could have been like, you know, only a couple of years or something like that if she was heavily drinking, or less. We don't really know. But you'd think if it was only for a couple of years, then they would have noticed a change in her behavior. Like her husband would have noticed something, like before he, you know, like he knew her before she started drinking and then after, right? He would have noticed a difference. But the fact that he said there was no sign of that at all, no change in her behavior, nothing that ever seemed to miss. So it makes me think that if she was drinking that whole time, that she would have had to have been drinking for the full 13 years that he knew her, which I don't know how long it takes for cirrhosis of the liver to occur, but she was quite young when the accident happened. So it's possible that that hadn't occurred yet.
So even if she was a heavy drinker, she's only 36, but if she was even drinking for like 15 years, that wouldn't have affected her liver yet, maybe? Is that what you're saying? Or it would have?
We don't know. Like, I don't know how long it takes for cirrhosis of the liver. It obviously depends on how much you're drinking, and like every person's kind of different. But like,
I guess maybe she was just drinking enough to like kind of be buzzed or like a little bit drunk every day, and that just wasn't enough in that amount of time to show up on her liver extensively yet. Yeah, like because she had known her husband for 13 years. So like I'm saying, like I was just saying, like if it had only been like a recent development in the last couple of years that she started drinking heavily, like you think he would have noticed a change in her behavior from, you know, the years before that when she wasn't drinking. So like the fact that there was no change to him, no noticeable change, made me think that she must have been drinking the whole time they knew each other, which for 13 years. And like you'd think after 13 years there would be cirrhosis of the liver if she was drinking heavily. But like you said, maybe it's just not at a level where cirrhosis would happen, but just enough where obviously she's buzzed, but not enough to actually cause any physical damage yet. So yeah, like not much is actually known about Diane's early life. The documentary does go into it a little bit. They say that Diane had 3 brothers, and she had a relatively normal childhood up until she was 9. And then when she was 9, her mother left the family, and it's reported or speculated, or at least by some in the documentary, that she had an affair with the neighbor next door, and that they had run away together, leaving her with her 3 brothers and their dad, and kind of made Diane take a motherly role at that time. She was taking care of her brothers, and she was being a very responsible early teen for the first couple of years. And they say that that's also because they say that one thing that stays the same throughout everything is that she was a really good mother. Like she was really, really caring for her kids and loved being a mom. And so they think that is kind of where that stemmed from. She had a very like nurturing, you know, that was her personality just from how she grew up and stuff. So like, and they also say that that could have been a big reason why she was so adamant that she wanted to be a good mom for her kids, because she knew the effect that it would have, because she knew that her mom had left the family and she knew what effect that had on her and her brothers. So she wanted to make sure that she was there for her kids and provided them with a good life. And when they do interview some of her friends from earlier in her life, they say that she was very outgoing, very extroverted, and she was kind of like the class clown. She was always in the spotlight, although they say she didn't really like the spotlight, but her personality was kind of so out there that it kind of made her have the spotlight, even though she didn't necessarily like thrive in the spotlight. And they say that she didn't really like date when she was growing up and stuff like that. Like Daniel, who she eventually ended up marrying, was her one true love. They actually met at one of her friends' weddings. At the time of the accident and stuff, she had a really good job. She was making over $100,000 a year. She worked in like an accounting department for like a cable company. She was the director of accounting and was making, you know, $100,000 a year. So people say that she was also
kind of a perfectionist. Like she seemed to be like the super mom. She would kind of be like that person where you would think like, how does she have enough hours in the day to do all this stuff? She would, pick the kids up, like, do everything for them, iron their clothes, iron her clothes, iron her husband's clothes, and just like on top of also working full time. And she also still had time to do like hobbies and make all these like picture books of the kids for the family. So she was kind of like that perfect super mom kind of figure, and that's what everyone says about her in the documentary. Like they're glowing about how perfect she was, but they say it could have been also a detriment because she was such a perfectionist that she felt like she had to be this sort of perfect mom. So that could have also been like a pressure for her too, like if she felt that she needed to like be on all the time and do all this stuff to perfection, it could have also put more pressure on her. And maybe that's why, I don't know if the pressure got to her or the stress got to her.
Was she on drugs?
No.
Like, I don't want to say, like, in order to be a really good mom and, work and be on that level, you have to be on drugs. But maybe she, like, was there any evidence that she's on prescription medication that maybe, I don't know, dosage changed? Maybe she was, like, missed a prescription while she was, like, camping or something. And then she was trying to make up for that with alcohol and just drank too much. Like, that's kind of a possibility as well.
Yeah, and, like, in the documentary, they do actually get her medical records to see, like they get her dental records, her medical history to see if any time that she went to the doctor, what medication she was prescribed. And there was at one time she was prescribed Ambien, but I think it was because it was like for a short period of time and it was like years ago. And it was when she got like a root canal at the dentist and she was on some medication for that as well. So she was not one to like ever be on a prescription for anything.
She said she had some sort of like tooth pain or something. Maybe she was back on that because of that. And then she started withdrawing. Yeah,
I mean, there was no record of that in her medical forms that they got. Like all of the stuff that she had ever been prescribed before that was on there, but there was nothing. I think the last one that was on there, they said was like a year prior to the accident was the last thing that she had ever been. And they said, like I said before, that in the weeks leading up to it, friends and family were saying that she was like holding her jaw, like looked like she was kind of in pain or something like that. But she was also one to always be like, oh, I'm fine, it's nothing. Like she was hesitant to take any like pain medication or anything like that. That's why also too they were thinking like the fact that she would stop the car, go into the gas station and ask for pain medication, like that's very unlike her, because she was always the type to be like, oh, it's fine, like whatever. So they said like something would have been so severe pain that like she couldn't, it's like she just had to get something.
I was just gonna say, like, when I mean, this is just my experience. When I had an abscess tooth like a couple years ago, and it was really bad. Like if you don't get those things like checked out, like they can go into like your bloodstream and stuff, and like really make you sick and stuff. And like I could see why she'd want some pain, because it's really painful to have like a tooth like that. But I mean, that would never make a toxicology come back like if alcohol in your system. But if like that abscess tooth like gets into your bloodstream, it can make you like really sick and stuff like that. So I'm wondering maybe if that's what happened, if she had like a bad I don't know, I'm just saying, like if she's holding a tooth, like,
well, that's what
maybe she was getting it like low-key, not prescription, but from a friend that had it, or maybe someone she knew that was like selling it to her, like kind of under the table kind of thing that nobody knew about, but it was happening and then it was wearing off or something.
Yeah, and yeah, that's possible too. And like what Steph was saying with like the abscess and stuff, like that's the angle that the family members in the documentary take. They say like it had to be, they were so like focused on that tooth, and like they're like there had to be something to go wrong. Like that's why they were just desperate for other tests to be run. Like, is it possible for like that to cause like a blood clot or a stroke or something like that? Because she's slurring her words and all this stuff. So also the journey itself from the campground to the house should have taken like, it ended up from the time they left to the time of the crash was 4 hours, which is way longer than it would ever normally take. So they did take kind of a weird route. It's kind of like she's taking these back roads going in circles. So it's like she doesn't even know where she's going. She's completely like, not.
But I feel like if she was intoxicated, like she'd be swerving in like in and out of traffic. Like, yes, she went the wrong way, but she'd still be like swerving in and out of traffic. But you said she's going like a straight line, like on a mission. Like, yeah. Normally, if you're drunk, you're like, and not intoxicated, you're like swerving and like I said, going in and out of cars, like going from one side of the road to the other. Like, you're not going in a straight line.
Yeah, and that's also too when they interview someone in the documentary, like one of the witnesses, he says that even though she was weaving in and out of traffic, it seemed to be like with precision. Like it wasn't like this sloppy, like all over the place. It was like a very calculated, like very neatly going in and out, like as much as you can go in and out. So he said that it seemed to be very precise, even though it was obviously very reckless. But I feel like, I don't know, if she was a functioning, like if she was obviously like severely addicted to alcohol and she was like a functioning alcoholic, like maybe she had mastered it so well that she was able to drive, and like, but that's why some people think that it was completely deliberate, that
she died, right?
She died, yes.
Okay.
She died, and
I guess
everyone died except
point.
her one son.
I was gonna say, I guess that's a good point. If she was like a functioning alcoholic, like she never did this before, right? This is like a random thing that had happened, so it wasn't like because she was an alcoholic, this is what happened. Something else was happening to her, even if she was an alcoholic. Even if she was secretly hiding her alcohol use, like this was still out of the ordinary from her normal. So like what happened to precipitate that? Because if she had been doing this for years and nothing like this had ever happened before, there was no, as far as I know from the documentary and stuff, like there was no signs of like depression or severe mental illness or anything like that. So it is kind of just a mystery as to, I mean, obviously the toxicology reports don't lie, so the alcohol is involved somehow, and tragic that ended up taking the lives of 8 people that day, 3 in the oncoming vehicle, and then 5 of the kids that are in the car, and herself as well. And like the documentary is really, really sad. Like they interview like people who were like there, like taking the kids out from the scene, and like, and it's really, I don't know, it's a little bit, goes a little bit too far. Like the documentary shows like Diane's body like at the scene, which is like a little bit graphic, and I don't know why they needed to show that, but they do. So it's really, really sad part of the documentary when they show all of that and talk about all that.
Was this a route that they took often every summer? Like they would go on to their trailer every summer? Was this like a road that they would take frequently, like in the summer, like years? You know what I mean? Like, is that?
I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about, like, they don't say if like they had been to that campground all the time before or anything like that. So I don't know.
Because it would kind of make sense if she kind of got disoriented and she didn't know where she was going. If that was the first time they were coming back home from that campsite, maybe she just got lost because she didn't know where she was going. But if it was something that she'd done every year and they did frequently, then that would be some more sketchy.
Yeah, but nobody speeds down the highway the wrong direction for miles if they're lost, right?
No.
You'd pull over and be like, whoops, like, Jesus.
But
and then
she did pull over once, right?
Yeah, she did pull over. There was at one point when she was talking to her brother on the phone, they suspect that she had been pulled over at that time, and that's why then she ended up leaving her phone at the side of the road. So she was pulled over at one time, but there was also speculation or like theories going around that she purposely left her car or her cell phone behind so that she couldn't be traced, so that nobody could find where she was going, like if they were trying, because they were all in like a frantic search to find where she was going, where she was, so they could stop her. So I don't know if that was an intentional thing by her to just leave her phone there, but obviously one of her nieces was very concerned enough to call on her own. And there's also multiple wrong numbers that are dialed in her phone that afternoon too, so I don't know if that could have been the niece trying to call who's dialing the wrong number, if it's Diane herself who's just dialing the wrong numbers. But nobody says that they smelled alcohol on her. Like the people at the campground who were speaking to her that morning say that didn't smell alcohol on her, didn't seem drunk at all. The McDonald's employees say the same thing. The gas station employee says the same thing. So there really is, like, from 9:30 till 1:30, there's like a 4-hour stretch of time where at some point she consumed the equivalent of 10 drinks that were most likely consumed after she left the campground. I think it's like the working theory. I don't really know, but at some point after she left the campground to 1:30, she consumed all that alcohol. And they say that the THC in her system, they were able to conclude that it had been smoked at least, or it had been taken at least like, or could have been 15 minutes to an hour before the crash. So even like on her journey along the way, she's also smoking pot and combined with the drinking. So
did she smoke pot regularly, or was this a new thing they found out as well?
Well, some of the family members that they interview say that she would sometimes take it before bed to sleep better. So she knew that she did do it, but it wasn't like an everyday thing or like an all the time thing. It was just kind of like semi-regularly, but not all the time. Usually for like sleeping and stuff like that. And but it's also too, like, they do talk, Diane's husband Daniel is in the documentary a lot, and he says that he works security, he works overnights. So they were on opposite schedules as well. Like, she would work the typical 9 to 5, he would be working overnight. So it is possible that she could have had this like secret or this other whole other life. They're not really like seeing each other all the time or spending that much time together. That's why they would like make it a big deal to like go on these weekend trips together over the summer, like to spend time together, because in their day-to-day life, like, they probably would never really see each other that much if they're working opposite schedules.
I was gonna say, like, to me it's hard to believe that it was like I want to say like a murder suicide, because I feel like, I won't say better way of doing that, but like maybe not have so many people involved. Like, I feel like if you want to kill yourself or whatever, there's a better way to do that. I don't, like, this whole story just seems odd to me. It just seems like it seems like it could be an accident, but it wasn't an accident. Like, I don't know, it's really weird to me. I don't know, it's intriguing.
Yeah, like that's why there's like multiple theories. People say, like, if you believe like the medical theory where it's like something went medically wrong and she wasn't actually drinking, which was like the family's stance, or if you believe that it was all an accident, like she just over calculated how much she could drink and like accidentally drank too much, and like then like by the time that she started to get really intoxicated, like it was too far gone, you can't go back from that. And then the third theory was that like it was very intentional, she purposely left her phone at the side of the road, like, and had this plan from the minute that she left the campground.
I feel like there's another theory too, like maybe even if she had like sort of in her past she had a little bit of like mental illness, or maybe even not, maybe something just like broke mentally in her brain, in her mind, and then for her to kind of cope with that, she was drinking excessively, and then that's just what led to this whole, I don't know, it's like she was just on a mission because of the way her mind was working, like something just flipped, and that was something that was going on.
And like the only thing like from her childhood that they do mention at all in the documentary is they say, like I mentioned before, how her mother had left the family when Diane was just 9 years old, but they say that her mother had tried to reach out to Diane and like have a relationship with her when Diane was older, and Diane was constantly like didn't want her in her life at all, didn't want anything to do with her, even though like Diane's brothers would have a relationship with their mother later on, but Diane would never talk about her mother. Like even when they're interviewing her husband in the documentary, like he barely knows much about her mother or like the situation regarding that. Like that's how little they talked about it. Or he's like, yeah, she never brought it up and I never pushed it, so I just knew that the mother had left and she never talked to her. So if she felt like I don't know if there was something there that we don't really know. Obviously you can't diagnose someone or don't know. I don't know, like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know how that plays into it, but
yeah, like you said before, there was like these stressors that were kind of like mounting on her, right? And like maybe there was something just got too much and just broke, and that's where she tried to treat it with this alcohol, and then things just kind of went from there. Because I feel like, yeah, it doesn't seem like this is something that someone would do intentionally if they were trying to commit suicide, like Steph said. Why put that many lives in danger and like drag it out like this, right? Like there's just other ways she could have done it if that was her goal.
Yeah, and people say like the one consistent thing, and they always say, is she was a loving mother, she loved her kids, and she has her 2 children in the car with her and her 3 nieces. Like, yeah, if she did have the plan to commit suicide, why did she have to do it with 5 kids in the car with her? Like, she could have like taken them home, then left again on her own in the car if she wanted to, right? Like, I have a hard time believing that she's like just this evil woman who wanted to kill these 5 children and herself. Like, I don't really buy into that theory, so I don't really know if I don't think it's an intentional thing. If I had to choose, I don't think it's that. I think it might be just she was maybe like super stressed that weekend and she just took a little bit too much and kind of misjudged. Like when in that part of the documentary where they're talking about it, she says like maybe she just like was like taking swigs of the bottle, just misjudged, took too much, and like you can't really, once you take it really, like, I don't know. And then she like got really intoxicated really quickly. And
yeah, maybe she like just hit her all at once too late before she realized, like, you know, sometimes you feel fine and then all of a sudden it just hits you, like when you stand up or something, right? So like maybe that's what was happening. It didn't hit her until she was already in the car and it was too late or something.
Yeah, and then at that time she's like, oh shit, what's happening? But like then you'd think like, I don't know, if she could pull off and like call someone and like stop. But the fact that she was, and like the witnesses that say like when she was driving the wrong way, it was like she was gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead as if it was like purposely, she knew where she was going, like she had a mission. obviously they don't know because they're just like seeing her for the couple seconds that she goes by, but like to them that's what it seemed. It wasn't like this woman who was just like, you know, intoxicated and like going all over the place, all over the road, and like didn't know what was happening. It's more like she knew what her intention was.
And it's really frustrating because like because she died, so it's like we won't really get to know what was going on. Like she's not alive to tell us and tell like them what happened. It's just so frustrating when things like that happen because you don't really get the whole story of what actually went on that day, like what made her snap. Like maybe the kids were being kids in the back and being too loud and being rough and whatever, and she got like a mental breakdown and she just like couldn't take it anymore and whatever. Or I just can't see it being intentional. Like I feel like, I don't know, I don't think she meant to, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, to me, I don't think it was intentional either. I feel like there was like multiple factors kind of multiplying all into this one event that happened.
And so much about this case is also speculative too. Like there's so much we don't know. The only things that we do know is like that the alcohol was in her system. The alcohol bottle was in the car at the scene of the crash. We have the surveillance videos from the McDonald's and the gas station. And then all of like the phone history where she's calling her brother and all of that stuff. And then like eyewitness testimony of like her erratic behavior and stuff. So like that's what we know. But then everything else kind of in there is totally speculative. And I feel like the documentary kind of follows her husband and her sister-in-law as they search for like trying to get this new tests done and trying to like come to a conclusion of proving her innocent, clear her name, because they're just, you know, angry that her name has been slandered all around when they don't for a second believe that. And then there's like obviously on the other side people say no, they're just in denial. They don't want to admit that she was really drinking. They're just like lying to themselves, and they've kind of believed it themselves that it wasn't happening. So I don't know like which side to take, because like I said, there's so much that's unknown in the case. So Jackie and Warren Hance, which were Diane's brother and sister-in-law, they were the parents of their three daughters were in Diane's car and they all died. They declined to be interviewed for the documentary, so they kind of just want to distance themselves. They didn't really want to be a part of the documentary or anything like that. However, they did start the Hance Family Foundation after the fact, and they're trying to honor the lives of their three daughters, and through initiative self-esteem educational programming is what their goal is. So they do like programs in school to help self-esteems of young kids and teens and stuff like that. So that's kind of how they're trying to honor their three daughters after the fact. But as for the documentary and stuff, like they weren't involved in that. So I don't really know what their thoughts are, like what their theories are, but you know, that's Warren, that's his sister. Diane was his sister. So I don't know what he's thinking, but
I kind of don't blame them for not wanting to be involved in documentary. I mean, like, why bring up tragic memories of something you just want to try to like move on with your life and try to like to me, like I don't think I would want to be in documentary. Like I wouldn't want to relive that day over and over again. So I kind of don't blame them for not wanting to be in it, but it would be interesting to know what he thought about the whole idea though too, like about his sister. So
yeah, I can kind of see where they're coming from too. It's like you don't have answers and you're not going to get answers really by being in this documentary. So I kind of see both sides where obviously her family is on her side saying, you know, this really wasn't intentional. I feel like it wasn't intentional. Just from what I know, I feel like something did kind of snap or something happened that was a mistake or that was just mental. And the other victims, of course, they feel like the family just is in denial, but because they want someone to blame, right? They need to be like, somebody needs to be held accountable. And I can see both sides for sure. It's definitely super painful for both sides.
Yeah, and like the family of the three men in the other car, they say that they've forgiven Diane. Like that's not their battle. Like they're not going to spend the rest of their lives like angry at this woman who's also died. Because in a way, it's also very tragic if she was suffering with an addiction so bad that this is what it led to. Obviously, that's terrible. So that's kind of not where their battle is. But they said that they're still working on trying to forgive the rest of Diane's family, like her husband and stuff, who are constantly in the media saying that, you know, she didn't drink at all and trying to like, you know, say that the toxicology reports aren't true. Like they say it's just kind of an insult to like their family members that died in that crash, and they think that the family should just kind of accept it and move on. Also, the documentary is from 2011, and like as far as I know, there hasn't been a ton of stuff that came out after that. So I don't really know. Maybe by now they have accepted it. Maybe they moved on. I don't really know, because that's like 10 years ago now. So who knows? But at the time of the documentary, they're still very much like fighting this. And I think they were hoping for some like different test results. But then at the end of the documentary, it says like the test results came back the same. Like the ones that when they sent for new testing and stuff, like it all came back that matched the original toxicology reports. So it's just a tragic case all around. And either way, I mean, you have 8 victims and 4 of which are children. So this crash was one of the worst motor vehicle accidents to happen in that county in New York. So it was obviously significant. That's a huge loss of life, is 8 people, 7 of which died on the scene. And one of them was taken to hospital after, but she died later. So, and it was like a huge, like the car caught fire. It was like kind of like those things you see in movies with like the big explosion of the car. It's like basically everything. And when you look at pictures of like the scene after that, it's pretty severe. So yeah, it's just like a very interesting case, because you wouldn't think like just a random car accident that it would have so much like theorizing or just like a weird circumstances surrounding it. But I guess it kind of goes to show you that like you never really know what someone is struggling with. Then obviously if she kept it away from her family for that long and no one really knew the severity of it, and it kind of is sad that like if she had maybe gotten the help she needed earlier on, that 8 people could have survived, including herself.
Yeah, it is really sad. This is kind of how it ended.
And I was gonna say, it's unfortunate. We'll never know what happened, like why she did it, because she's not there to tell us. And it's just we're always left with like the unknown of like not knowing the whole story. So maybe something will come out and hasn't already. Maybe some stuff will come out in a couple years, and maybe we'll find out like what actually happened. But I think there's just not enough information or evidence out there to really know what happened and or why she did it. The whole thing is tragic.
Yeah, it really is. There's no way around it. It's tragic either way, whether it was intentional, whether it was an accident, whether it was medical, like whichever the answer is. Like I said, I've already said what I believe happened, which was that it was like not intentional, but it wasn't a medical thing. It was like an unintentional intoxication or over intoxication of her.
To me, I feel like it was kind of a combination of like she drank too much because something else had happened. So I feel like it was this combination of too much stress or like a psychological break for whatever reason. And then she drank too much to try and fix that. And then this whole thing just compounded. So either way, I feel like it wasn't intentional on her part. But what the real answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both of you guys. Like, I feel like it wasn't intentional. Like, I don't feel like she meant to kill those people and herself. I think she just, like Katie said, had too much to drink, not realizing what it would do to her, and had a mental breakdown or whatever, and just a tragic turn of events.
If you want to know more about the case or anything like that, if you want to watch this documentary, so it's called There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane, and it was done by HBO. It's on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube, but I don't know if it's legal. So definitely check out that documentary if you are interested, because it is really good, and it's what got me into this case initially, so it has a lot of good information in it. If you or anyone you know is struggling with substance use issues, there is a resource available, Wellness Together Canada. You can call them at 1-866-585-0445. You can go onto their website at wellnesstogether.ca. Or there's also Kids Help Phone for Youth, which is a 24-hour chat service as well. If you have any mental health issues or substance use concerns, you can call them at 1-800-668-6868, or you can go onto their website for their chat service as well. And then each province has its own helpline, so you could just look up some local resources in your home province or in your state if you're in the US. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. You can find us on all the social medias, as always, on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast, on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. We have a Facebook page at Crime Family Podcast, and you can email us with suggestions or feedback at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. So we hope that you will drink lots of water. Got to stay hydrated. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.